Everybody thinks of Joe Rogan. Everybody thinks of these podcasts made by The Guardian or Wondery. The reality is, for 99% of podcasters, is not going to get millions of downloads. It takes time. It takes commitment. Don't give up after 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Keep going and just keep building that up, and you will watch your downloads grow and grow and grow. Welcome to another episode of Smarter Podcasting with me, your host, Niall Mackay, the podcast guy. I created my first podcast in 2019 called A Vietnam Podcast, and I have something really exciting to share with you today. From that podcast, I then created 7 Million Bytes Podcasts, and we now help create podcasts worldwide. We've worked with over 50 podcasts, produced over 700 episodes, helped with millions of downloads, and helped podcasts get to the top of the charts. And this podcast, Smarter Podcasting, is here to help you make the best podcast possible. So I share my own tips and tricks, my failures, and I talk to experts in the industry. Now, in this episode, I have something, as I mentioned, really exciting that I wanted to share with you today. So I've talked a lot over the years that A Vietnam Podcast is in the top 10% of podcasts worldwide. And I say that regularly on A Vietnam Podcast. I've mentioned it here. It's on my website. And it made me think, well, I should check that. I haven't checked that in years. So I had a look and I couldn't believe it. A Vietnam Podcast is now in the top 5% of podcasts worldwide. And in this episode, I'm going to share my 5 tips for you to help get your podcast into the top 5% of podcasts worldwide, how to find that, what your downloads mean, and how to make the best podcast possible. So let's dive right in. So I want to start, first of all, to share with you what is expected of a podcast, because I remember when I first started, I had no idea what was good. I started and I was getting numbers, and I'm going to show you these numbers, which a lot of people don't, but I'm going to be completely transparent. I'm going to show you my download numbers. I had no idea what they meant. For probably a year or two, I had no idea what they meant at all. I was like, is this good? Is it bad? Everybody thinks of Joe Rogan. Everybody thinks of these podcasts made by The Guardian or Wondery that have a celebrity in them, that get millions of downloads, that have all these advertisers. And the reality is, for 99% of podcasters, that is not going to happen. So I want to share with you today, as I said, what is a good amount of downloads, listens, why is that important, is that important, and how to help your podcast get into the top 5%. So first of all, let's look at my numbers on A Vietnam Podcast. So you can see here, I have it all ready for you. This is my all-time downloads, and I still think this isn't very good, right? Because we all compare ourselves to other people. We hear of these podcasts with millions of downloads, but this is actually incredible. I don't know any other podcast. I don't know many other podcasts, not any. I don't know many other podcasts that we've even worked with that have had this level of downloads. And maybe you've got much better and you're scoffing at this. Maybe you don't and you're thinking this is incredible. It doesn't really matter. The biggest thing is don't compare yourself, which is bad advice because we all compare ourselves to other people. But I want to show you what this means. So first of all, I started in May 2019. I started nearly 5 years ago. And you can see first month, 202 downloads, but I think I started May 19. So that's only 2 weeks. So we can't really count that. First full month, 1,117. Let's start from there. That's pretty amazing. That's about 250, 300 downloads a week. And I had no idea what that meant. I didn't know if that was good or bad. It seemed okay. Some people might be thinking that's rubbish. Other people might be watching this and thinking, wow, I'm getting 15, 20, 50. That's incredible. So you can see these numbers kind of tracked along. They're up and down a bit, and it always goes up and down, but it's up and down a bit. There's some really low months. I can't remember why or what was the reason, but probably on average, maybe 300 to 400, 500 a month in that first year. Well, that's first 2 years. And so again, I had no idea, was this good or bad? And then what changed everything for me was finding this statistic that I'm going to show you. So if you go to Buzzsprout and you go to Global Stats, this is only the statistics for podcasts that are hosted on Buzzsprout, which is by far from all of them, but it's probably pretty representative, because why would Buzzsprout be any different from any other platform? So you can see total amount of monthly downloads on this platform, new episodes, active podcasts. And that's a big one as well. People think that there's millions and millions of podcasts. I've heard figures that there's only about 250,000 active podcasts in the world. And If Buzzsprout's saying 120,000, you could say that Buzzsprout probably make up 30 to 50% of all the hosts. I don't actually know. And I'm going to show you this one right here, which is what changed everything for me. The episode downloads in the first 7 days. And again, this is only for Buzzsprout. It's Buzzsprout statistics. They are AIB certified, but I think we can take a lot of learnings from this. And what blew me away was to be in the top 10% of podcasts worldwide. According to Buzzsprout, you need 469 downloads in the first 7 days. To be in the top 50%, which is the median podcast, you only need 28 downloads. And that is the main crux of what I want to share with you today is remember, it's not about getting hundreds of downloads. 28 people listen to your podcast every week within the first 7 days and then are interested in what you have to say. And 80% of those people are going to finish that podcast to the end. Can you imagine doing a weekly meeting and having 28 people in a room that show up every week to listen to what you have to say? So don't be too hard on yourselves. Don't look at these big numbers. Top 1% of podcasts is those big podcasts that are produced by Wondery and The Guardian and the BBC and have big budgets where you hear at the end the credits and it's the producer, the associate producer, the sound designer. And you might be like me. I do this by myself. I have an editor. I have a small team, but I mostly do all of this myself. I'm doing this in my living room right now. So don't be too hard on yourselves. Remember these figures here. And then how did I know I was in the top 10%? So a little bit different to these statistics here. Well, I went to a website called listennotes.com. And so if you haven't been to Listen Notes, make sure you go to Listen Notes and you claim your podcast. So you can claim your podcast, upload it here. It obviously does an update because this is the really old logo from when we first started. Now, when I found this and it said I was in the top 10% of podcasts, it blew my mind. I was like, wait, what? And I can't remember if it was this I found first or the Buzzsprout, but one of these I found first. And then, as I mentioned, did I say this already? Recently, because I'd said it on a podcast that I made, Smarter Podcasting, I think, I said I'm in the top 10%. Yeah, it was the episode with Joel Zarilla. We talked about LinkedIn. Go back and check it out. I mentioned that we were in the top 10% of podcasts globally. And so I went back to Listen Notes, and I couldn't believe it. I'm in the top 5%. That is just mind-blowing. And it gives me a lot of confidence in what I'm doing with this podcast and with 7 Million Bikes podcast. Sometimes you have that imposter syndrome and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm telling people to make a podcast, give them this advice. Do I really know what I'm doing? But this gives me the confidence that I do. So one of the biggest tips I want to share with you is something that you probably hear all the time, but it is most podcasts don't make it past 10 episodes. Because I think a lot of people think that they're going to get those thousands of downloads within the first 10 episodes, and it is a hard slog. You've got to keep on going. And so you can see how much up and down I had in that first year. But after 2021, you can just see how it has gone up and up and up. And if I go cumulative, you can see that. So 2020, let's go May 2021. So 2 years after I started, I'd had 16,000 downloads. It took me 2 years to get to 16,000 downloads. Let's go 2 years forward, May 2023. I'm now up to 50,000. So from 15, where were we at? Sorry, May. Yeah, well, 16,000 all the way up to 50,000 or 48, sorry. So I increased by, my maths is terrible, 35,000 downloads in those 2 years. And then if we skip forward from May 2022 to May 2024, you can see I'm now up to 70,000 downloads. So massive, it's doubled again. And then if I put it back to over time, you can actually see here, look at that jump. December 2024 and January 2025 are my two biggest months ever in 5 years. So you can see it takes time, it takes commitment. But there are other things that I have done along that way. And that's what I wanted to share with you in this episode. So number one, be consistent. Keep putting out those episodes, but don't break your back over it and don't stress yourself out. One of my biggest tips and one of the things I'm most glad about is do seasons. So I've done seasons since the beginning and I purely did that just to make my own life easier. There's no rhyme or reasons for them. I'd sometimes say I'm going to do 12 episodes. I do 10, I do 8. I think during lockdown when I got put in quarantine, I think we did 5 episodes for season 3. Sometimes I have a break between seasons, sometimes I don't. It honestly can be anything. So I would do seasons to give yourself that flexibility that if you do want to take a break between seasons, you can do that. You can put out best of episodes, you can put out mini episodes, you can put out past episodes, or you can just do nothing. But when you are putting out episodes, be consistent. And one of the things I've seen people ask over the years is taking a break a bad thing? In my experience, no. I haven't lost any listeners. As you can see over the years, it's just continued to go up and up and up. And that's even taking a break where I took a break for a year. So can you take a break? Absolutely, I would say. But when you are in season, be consistent. Tell people this is season whatever. We're going to do 10 episodes. If you don't, it's fine. So turn up on the same day, the same time, every week, every 2 weeks, every month. I wouldn't recommend monthly, but if you have to, monthly, because people will know you're going to be there and then you're going to help build your audience that way. So number one, consistency. Now, number two, this is a really important one, and this is why you have to do more than 10 episodes. Build a back catalog. Now, as you can see with my numbers, they're going up and up and up. And I looked into this just recently because I got into the top 5% and I kind of looked at my numbers. 30% of my weekly downloads, which contribute to that number, comes from the back catalog. You can see here in December, I got 3,350 downloads. About 1,000 of those downloads come from people listening to my old episodes. And so another tip I would give is make evergreen content. That's been one of my tenets, one of my strengths from the beginning, is I make evergreen content so that if you go back and listen to my very first episode, it could sound like it was made yesterday. We don't reference time. We don't reference current events. Mostly, we try our best not to. Sometimes they slip in, but mostly not. And I'll go all the way back here. Let's go all the way back to the beginning. So I go back to the first episode, May 2019. And we can actually see on Buzzsprout, I don't know about other hosts because I've used a few, but not in great detail. I love Buzzsprout because of the just the ease of use. And I'll put the link in the show notes in the description. If you want to use my link, then we'll both get $20 credit, which is pretty good. I've used it over the years with quite a lot of podcasts. But let's look at this one. We talked for so long, we ended up splitting it into 2 episodes. But we can see here, view episode stats. So let's have a look. How many downloads did it get? Yeah, we can see right here. So you see in that first day, it got 42 downloads in the first day. And then obviously it drops. That's what always happens. But you can see here, went 0 for a while. But nearly every day, this episode is getting at least 1 listen. And even here, we got 6. So building up that back catalog really makes a massive difference. 30% of your downloads can come from your back catalog. So just be consistent. Keep publishing. Keep going. Don't give up after 10 episodes. Don't give up after 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Keep going and just keep building that up and you will watch your downloads grow and grow and grow. Now, number 3 is a controversial statement that I've said over and over again over the years. Some people agree with me, some people don't, but audio quality is more important than the quality of your content. Listeners will forgive a lot, but especially these days, they won't forgive bad quality audio. Invest in a good mic, and that can be less than $100, £100, wherever you are. It doesn't have to be much at all. Just get a mic, get a good one if you don't. It is very rare these days that I hear a podcast that isn't well made. I think the cost of everything, the cost of editing, the cost of software, cost of microphones, everything's come down so much since I started that there really is no excuse. But in saying that, I know a podcast here that was made and it was just great content. I tried listening to it. I couldn't listen more than 1 minute because it was made with an iPhone in the middle of a big room, put between the 2 guests and turned on. And the audio quality was awful, God awful. And so I just could not get into it. And there have been over the years a couple of times I put on a podcast. As soon as I hear bad quality audio, I'm going to turn that off. So just invest a little bit in a good microphone, know what you're doing, how to use it, and make the best quality content that you can. Trust me, it will make a massive difference. Now, number 4 is make your podcast discoverable. And we've done an episode about this. That doesn't just mean SEO. I have a massive problem with people saying use keywords in your title and use keywords in your show notes and all of this stuff. I don't believe any of that works. And as I said, I've done an episode on Smarter Podcasting about podcast SEO. Go back and find that out. SEO is about websites, and I'm going to get to that in a second. So how do you make it discoverable? My big tip for number 4, making it discoverable, and some of you might not want to hear this, but get your podcast on YouTube. Even if it is just the audio, I don't think that's going to help you build much of an audience on YouTube because they don't go on there to listen to static videos. Make a video is what I would say. I've said this now. I'm a complete convert to podcasts on video, on YouTube as well. But even at the minimum, make sure you link your RSS feed to YouTube. And if you don't know how to do that, I've shown that in an episode as well. Go back, link your RSS feed to YouTube, and it will put all your audio episodes on YouTube. It will help make them discoverable. That's where you could put some keywords in your YouTube titles, if you even know how to do that, or if you want to do that, because YouTube is owned by Google, obviously. And go and Google anything. When you Google something, you're going to see YouTube videos come up. That's the difference. I rarely see podcasts come up on the front page of Google. And you need to be on the front page. If not number one on Google, you need to be on the front page. Think about how you use Google as well. So get on YouTube, make short clips if you use video. If you don't do video, don't do audiograms. I've tried it. They don't get any traction. You'll be wasting your time. It is the big reason why I would say do video. And let me show you a couple of examples of what I'm talking about so you know that I'm not talking rubbish here. So we found out recently, we did an episode on a Vietnam podcast about happy hours in Saigon, because I love happy hour. I love to save money. I like to drink. So without any real thought to this about SEO or discoverability or anything like that, we found out super early. If you Google Saigon happy hours, which I know I do a lot, I don't know, and I think quite a lot of other people do. I haven't looked into it, but you can see already there's so many websites about Saigon happy hours. We're now the number one website. We're now the number one hit on Google if anyone looks up Saigon happy hours. So you know what it's like. You use Google. Most people go to the first link. They're going to come to the first link. They're going to see me, unfortunately. But then there's going to be right here, Apple Podcast. If you're on the phone and you click this, it's going to open the app. Then you can subscribe if you want to. There's all these other apps as well. We got Spotify, and then so you can see here that immediately it brings you to Apple Podcasts. If you click on this on your phone, it will immediately open the app, which hopefully you'll subscribe. It's got Apple, Spotify, everything else here, YouTube links as well. And this is where you put in the keywords. I mean, the keyword here is just Saigon and happy hour, but this is how you are going to capture SEO. And that's what really frustrates me when they say, oh, dude, just do SEO, which is not easy just to do SEO. If you Google Saigon happy hours, look, no podcasts come up about this, even though that's what my podcast is called. Then recently as well, so just to give you an example, that's why it's really important. Then I got a message last week from my friend Lewis, who does the music, and he's like, oh, not last week, just 2 days ago. And he's like, hey, we just Googled this and look at this. So there's a place here in Saigon, which is like a big attraction, not a big attraction, but it is big-ish, called Vin Wonders in District 9. He searched for this because he wanted to go with his parents, and he messaged me and he's like, hey, look who I saw. And there we are right there. And on the one he sent me, my video actually showed up. It was the thumbnail. There you go. There's me. He was looking at the images as well, and he sent me, yep, there we are right there as well under images. This is what helps your podcast get found. And this is the biggest tip. Number 5, and it relates to what I just showed you, is build a website for your podcast. That's how you're going to capture SEO. That's how you're going to be on the top page of Google. If you don't already, get a website for your podcast. The website I showed you, the URL is a Vietnam podcast. So now if anyone just Googles Vietnam podcast, there I am right there. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Top 5 links are all me. Pictures as well. All a Vietnam podcast, number 1. And that makes a massive difference because as Vietnam grows as a society, as more and more tourists are coming here, people from all over the world are Googling this. So in fact, let's try something. I'm going to put on my VPN for the United Kingdom. I'm going to go on incognito mode. I'm going to type in Vietnam podcast. So right now they think I'm from the UK and I'm still number 1. And I'm the first website. That's incredible. So out of the top 5 links, I'm 1, 2, 3. I'm on this list as well, I know. Then because I'm on YouTube, here's the YouTube video comes up. This is why I'm telling you it's important to be on YouTube as well, because the discoverability. They don't often show podcasts or podcast episodes, but they will show this. What about Vietnam? They're pretty big as well. I've interviewed her before. She's awesome. And she's been on my podcast as well. The University of Leeds, that's a random one. But that's why it's so important. Let's just go as well. YouTuber versus podcast. I think this came up for... Yep, there we go. All right, so YouTuber versus podcast. That was one of the keywords we targeted. So you can do keyword research if you know how to do it. We have a small team, so they can do this. And we knew that YouTuber versus podcast was a big keyword. So I made an episode about it. There's a reason why I did that. And you can see we are on the first page of Google if anyone types in YouTube versus podcaster. And we're ahead of some like really big names in podcasting. So one of the things that we will do is we will reverse engineer it now, especially for this podcast, Smarter Podcasting. We haven't done it for this episode. I just wanted to share my top tips to get in the top 5% of podcasts because I'm really excited about it. But we reverse engineer it sometimes. So we'll look at some of the keywords. What are people searching for? And then I will make an episode about that keyword. Then we make the website based on that because we know people are going to search for it. Then they're going to find the podcast and then they're going to listen to it. And I'm starting again with Smarter Podcasting. I'm way back to the beginning and I'll share with you my stats from Smarter Podcasting. So Vietnam Podcast has done really well. So Vietnam Podcast is just blowing up. It's doing better and better after 5 years. Smarter Podcasting is quite new. We don't get the hugest amount of downloads. So right now we're getting about 30 to 50 downloads. I'd say an average of 30, 50 every now and again. So it's not great. But again, if we look at the global stats, getting about 30 downloads. So right now, I'm already in the top 50% of podcasters worldwide. So we've now changed to an episode every week. That's instantly going to double the amount of downloads that we got last year. So when I was getting about 30 downloads an episode, I might still get the same, but instead of getting 60 a month, I'm now going to get 120 a month. Now, the website is a little bit different because the website is 7millionbikes.com. It's not Smarter Podcasting. 7 Million Bikes is the company that makes podcasts, including this one, a Vietnam podcast, and we work with lots of different clients. And then the podcast, but it does live on here. So that's why you could see when I Googled YouTuber versus podcaster, this is the link that came up. And there's some on-page SEO that's called as well, so that we make sure that there's pictures and there's the right headlines and all of this kind of stuff. But what we do is, this is where the podcast is, but what we do for every episode is we create a blog post as well. So every single podcast that I make for Smarter Podcasting also has a blog as well. So I'm kind of rambling a bit. I've gotten a bit off track, but this is why a website is so important. It's why YouTube is so important as well for discoverability, and it's why those shorts are so important too. So what we recommend to you and to everyone, and if you want to work with us, we can help you do this. We'll do this for you. We'll do this with you, is you can reverse engineer it if you want. Choose a keyword related to your niche, your industry, and then make a podcast about that. I would strongly suggest you just now have to do video. So make a video podcast about that. Record yourself like I'm doing right now. Then take the audio from that, put that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, everywhere that anyone can get audio, obviously, and YouTube as well. So connect your RSS feed to YouTube. As I mentioned, done a whole episode about that. Go back and check that out. So you've got the video, then the audio. Then, because you got the video, this is the most important thing. Get those short form videos and make about 3 to 5 of them per episode and post them consistently wherever you want. We do it on YouTube. The biggest short we've had, the audio had about 200, 300 listens, which was standard. The video actually did really badly. I think it's less than 100 views. So the video doesn't get a huge amount of views. But between those 5 reels, it blew up. So one of those reels got 10,000 views alone on YouTube. Then we also post them on LinkedIn too. And I can't remember off the top of my head, but we also post them on Instagram as well. And those got thousands of views as well. So from that one piece of content, between YouTube, audio, the shorts, and then the traffic from the website, this one piece of content got, I think it was, we calculated about 20,000 views or impressions, whatever, however you want to call it. So at this point, I guess it really depends on the goal of your podcast. If you just want to make the best podcast, audio podcast possible, you're fine with that. You don't want to be seen by a million people, then keep doing what you're doing. Take my tips. Ignore the video, do everything else. You will be successful without a doubt. If you want to take it to the next step and reach as many people as you can, reach as many eyeballs, promote your business, promote your podcast, promote yourself, whatever you want to do, or you just have fun, love doing it, you're making something that is just really enjoyable, but you want people to listen to it, then I would get on video as well. So those are my top 5 tips. I really can't stress enough getting on a website. I really can't stress enough getting a website and getting on YouTube. It's going to make the biggest difference. Be consistent and just keep on going. make seasons, take breaks when you need them, and you can see those stats I showed you. It's blown my mind how much more we are getting. And the final little tip as well, like I mentioned on Smarter Podcasting, we've just doubled our episodes, our output from every 2 weeks to every week. So a couple of things why a Vietnam podcast is blowing up even more than ever as well. I forgot to mention this. So one, I took a long break. I had to take a break and take a step back. I lost the energy. I lost the enthusiasm. I was getting bored of my own content. I felt like I was saying all the same things, and I'm still saying all the same things, but I enjoy it again. So I came back fresh with more energy. I took a break for about a year. I told my listeners I was taking a break for a year. And then I just didn't really pay much attention to it. I posted some old episodes. I wasn't consistent. I posted some other content from other podcasts that I worked on. And one day I went to check the stats and I couldn't believe it. I was still getting like 300 downloads a week. I was like, this can't be right. How am I getting downloads still? I'm not producing any new content. And that is when I realized the strength of the back catalog. People are Googling the podcast. People are finding a Vietnam podcast, or they're already subscribed. And I have hundreds and hundreds of episodes in the back catalog, and people were listening to them. So without producing any content, I was still a very relevant and very listened to podcast, which was absolutely mind-blowing. So we came back strong. I said, okay, we're going to do it right. So I came back in June last year. We added video to it. We've recorded some, and we had a studio for a little while, but then we had to give that up. But I've increased the quality of my videos. I now have 2 cameras. That's a new addition I've just done recently. I've recorded episodes off-site. I've recorded them in my apartment. I've recorded them in nice studios and things like this. So we've just upped the game a lot. As I mentioned, we're on YouTube as well. The shots are amazing. But as I mentioned, we got our own website. I've never had a VietnamPodcast.com before, just 7millionbikes.com. And then don't get me into that. That's had so many iterations over the year, but that's now just for 7 Million Bikes Podcast. I'd never had a VietnamPodcast.com. And the funny thing was, to buy VietnamPodcast.com, I think the fee was like $20,000 or something crazy, like to buy VietnamPodcast.com. But our VietnamPodcast.com was like super cheap, super normal. I can't even remember, but not expensive at all. And so having that domain, having my own website for Vietnam Podcast, doing the shorts, being on YouTube, and the biggest thing ever, what I just mentioned, starting about 2 months ago. So you've just seen that December and January are our biggest months ever. That actually coincides with me doubling the output. I added an extra episode. So I really enjoy doing YouTube now. I told you I'm a massive convert. Whether you're watching or listening to this episode, I love doing videos now. I started a podcast. I loved hiding behind the microphone. Nobody could see me. I could just speak. Could wear whatever I want. I could be hungover. I could have messy hair. Now I've got to do my hair. I've got to make sure I'm showered and ready before I record. But I love doing video now. I started to do more and more YouTube style videos. And it doesn't massively fit with the niche that I've built up over the years, which is sharing stories of people connected to Vietnam, one-on-one interviews that I've always done. So I thought, how do I fit these in? And so I then created the Saigon Sunday sessions. So now I do an episode that comes out every Sunday, not always recorded on a Sunday, not always a session. If you live in the West, you know what a session is when you get on it. But I'll be maybe in a bar or having drinks, a little bit drunk sometimes, not always, but sometimes. And that's something, as you know, if you watch this podcast or if you follow this or a Vietnam podcast, I never drink and pod, as I say. But these episodes are a bit looser. And then now, because I got this new camera and because I really enjoy making these YouTube videos, as Adrian and I have been traveling over the last couple of months, I've made more and more videos that are like travel vlogs, I guess you could call them. And they're now coming out on Sundays as well. So creating an extra episode for me allowed a bit more freedom, a lot more creativity, and to do something different. So every Wednesday is still the traditional one-on-one interview episode, sharing stories of people connected to Vietnam. But on Sundays, we're going to do something a little bit different. And so to sum it up, over the last year, by adding the website, adding YouTube, doing shorts, and then doubling the amount of episodes that we did, you can see how much how downloads have grown. And it's just been incredible to see. And so again, you can see we're about to hit 100,000 downloads. Like what did we get in the last 30 days? We got 3,000 downloads in the last 30 days. So within 3 months, we're going to hit 100,000 downloads, which I don't know what I'm going to do to celebrate. It's going to be incredible. But you can just see this graph, how much it has grown over time. And it takes that time and dedication. And so I hope these tips have helped. I hope that you can take maybe some, if not all of this information, because I know it's a lot, and help build your podcast as well. So final thought, don't make downloads the main goal, even though this whole episode has been about downloads. But if you do want to get in the top 5%, take all these tips on board. But just do it because you love it. Do it because you enjoy it. As I mentioned, I took a break because I fell out of love with my own podcast. And now I've got the energy, I'm passionate, I'm back involved and just love it again. For me, it is a little bit about downloads. It's like a external gratification and external motivation to see those downloads go up. But to be honest, it's not the be all and end all. I don't make this episode that you're watching right now with the goal of I want to get this many downloads. As I showed you my downloads for Smarter Podcasting, they're getting on average 30 downloads. And thank you so much for being one of those downloads, one of those listens. I really do truly appreciate that. And if I had a room of 30 people in front of me listening to what I have to say every week about podcasting, I would be over the moon. So I really do appreciate you tuning in. So thank you so much for that. Make it about doing it because you love it, because you have a reason to do it, not just about the downloads. And the other thing that's going to just basically contradict everything that I've said, and we'll talk about this in a future episode, it's not about downloads anymore. It's about engagement and how long people listen to your episode. So if you have got this far, please send me a message. If you're on Spotify, you can leave a comment. If you're on YouTube, leave a comment. Tell me how far you've gotten into this episode, because it's not about downloads now. It doesn't matter if you have those downloads of the millions, the numbers, the big numbers. If people tune out after 10, 20% of your episode, then you've done a bad job. The charts are based on engagement. How long do people listen? And as I mentioned, on average, people are going to listen. 80% of people who start your episode are going to get to the end. So I hope that helps. Remember, we can help you if you want. So get in touch with me, neil@7millionbikes.com. The link is in the show notes. Go to 7millionbikes.com, see more about what we do. We would love to work with you to help you make the best podcast possible and help you get into the top 5% of podcasts worldwide. So thank you again. Thank you for listening. Don't forget, rate, review, share, subscribe. Tell all your friends about us. Tell all other podcasters about us. If you know someone who's thinking of starting a podcast, tell them about Smarter Podcasting as well. It's the best thing that you can do to help this podcast grow. So thank you very much for listening. Cheers.